Hello, I'm Juliet Mann, and this is the Agenda podcast, CGTN Europe's one-stop shop for smart, in-depth discussion of the issues that really matter in the world today. New UK Business Secretary Peter Kyle has had to hit the ground running. Just days after being promoted to the job, he was off on a whistle-stop tour to Washington, D.C. and then to Beijing, where he helped to reboot the UK-China Economic and Trade Commission, also known as Jetco, which hadn't met in 7 years. But what does this really say about the state of the UK's trade relationship with China? And where are the mutually beneficial opportunities for trade with the world's second largest economy? Joining me now are Dr. Gerard Lyons, economist and Senior Independent Director at the Bank of China UK, Zhiguang, Professor of International Politics from Fudan University, and Michael Mainelli, Chairman of ZN Group and former Lord Mayor of London. Great to have you all on the agenda. Gerard, let me start with you, because Peter Kyle has described China's economic might as unignorable. No one's really ignoring China, though, are they? I mean, what was the real purpose of his visit to China?
Well, UK-China economic and financial relations have been on an improving trend in the last year. So I think the reason for his visit is to actually give it another new lease of life. This meeting, which, as you said, hasn't happened for 7 years, has been in the making for some time. Earlier this year, we had the economic and financial dialogue, which took place between the two countries for the first time in a number of years. So there is definitely a warming relationship between the UK and China. From a UK perspective, the UK wants to actually sell both more goods and services into China. And at the same time, the UK wants China to actually start investing more in the UK. And then on top of it all, there's a third frame, which is for the UK to partner China in terms of the rest of the world. From a UK perspective, the relationship with China over the last year and a half has been coined by the 3 Cs: cooperate, compete, and challenge. In the UK, many businesses are saying there should be another C: consistency. So the idea is that it deepens the relationship, and hopefully we'll start to see some consistency as well in the future.
It's interesting you talk about consistency because, you know, as Gerard says, Michael, these are the first Jetco talks since 2018. And this visit has been in the diary for many months before the UK's recent cabinet overhaul. Peter Kyle's only been in the job for a week, though. Is this visit more symbolic than anything else?
Well, it is certainly a combination of symbolism, but also, as Gerard has pointed out, consistency. The last 14 months since we've had this new government, there's been a real change in the state of the sea, so to speak, between China and the UK. It's been phenomenal. So I think, yes, there's a bit of symbolism that the very first important visit that's being made by the new minister is to China. But on the other hand, that's to ignore the immense amount of groundwork that's being done by the officials beneath him and by the departments within the government to ensure that, as Gerard said, yes, there is a lot of cooperation. There's a little bit of, challenge that is needed. And we are there to compete in fairness, but consistency in our attitude is important. And I think I applaud the minister for doing this so early on.
Zhiguang, the UK is pursuing a package of deals, just like Gerard was talking about there, a package of deals with China worth more than $1.35 billion over the next 5 years or so. And that's all part of a pragmatic, careful and confident approach to relations with China. What does that look like to you?
I think this is definitely a very positive change, considering that over the past 7 years, there are some obstacles between UK and China trade, as well as China and the European countries in general. So this visit certainly bears quite a significant meaning to both sides. On the UK side, I believe the package deal includes quite a strong focus on manufacturing sector, which again will definitely play a positive impact in the later on UK manufacturing industry, car components and clean energy, pharmaceutical, and all of that, which are quite crucial for the UK economic sort of development in the later decade. And then for the China side, it is quite encouraging as well, because it's definitely a very clear sort of win-win. Chinese proposed a win-win situation going on here, and I'm sure China wants to use this opportunity to demonstrate that it is possible and sincere for China to work closely with Western countries, and the sectors that China are interested in includes clean energy, solar and wind farm, and of course biotechnology. All these sectors play a crucial role in the later on Chinese development, and of course with China focusing on emphasizing the importance of dual circulation, this will be a good example that China definitely wants to see.
OK, so we're talking a lot about the what, but we need to dig into a bit more. It is the how and the when. I mean, Gerard, look, the UK wants to make it easier for British car makers to export to China, remove barriers on things like cattle hides and sheepskins, and help UK education firms get their qualifications, get their services recognised in China. How soon do you see all of that happening?
Well, I think we need to put it in context in answer to your question. China is Britain's 5th biggest trading partner. It's our 6th biggest export market, and China is the 3rd biggest importer into the UK. All that sounds pretty impressive, but when you actually dig into the detail, the numbers still leave a lot to be desired. Of UK exports, China is only 1.3%. Of UK imports, China accounts for 7.7%. And the total trade is about £100 billion per year. So these are small figures. So in answer to your question, in some respects, we've shown that we can do it because we're trading with both sides in terms of on the export and on the import side. But the actual scale of numbers leaves a lot to be desired. So in answer to your question, I think there's two aspects to it. From a UK export side, to follow on from the last speaker, we really need to showcase what we're good at. And the UK is trying to showcase 5 areas: financial and professional services, clean energy, advanced manufacturing, life sciences, and the creative sector. So we've got to show to the Chinese we're good at these, deepen our ties in those areas. And as the Chinese economy continues to open up, hopefully the Chinese will buy more of those goods and services from us. On the UK import side, we need to make it more attractive for the Chinese to actually want to export into the UK. And we need to cover 1 or 2 of those areas where there's technical details and challenges. But the UK has a lot of opportunities now, having left the European Union, to develop its own trading relationship with China in a way in which it wasn't able to do so when it was a member of the European Union. So we've got a strong basis on which to work, but really the numbers suggest there's a lot more upside potential.
OK, so some scalability is the focus. I mean, Michael, picking up on that, these UK-China Joint Economic and Trade Commission talks come as Prime Minister Keir Starmer's pushing to boost economic growth in Britain. Gerard talked about those 5 key areas, looking to increase trade opportunities with China. Where do you think that the UK and China can work more closely together?
Well, moving beyond those 5 areas, which are clearly the ones that I would agree with wholly, I would actually point to finance. Coming from a City of London perspective, we have 40 significant Chinese financial institutions operating the city. They see London as their headquarters for the Western Hemisphere, really, as much as anything else, but certainly for Europe. We want to keep that advantage. This means that where are we cooperating them in financial services? Well, firstly, we remain the largest offshore renminbi trading center in the world, next to Hong Kong, depending on how you view that. But London handles something like 40% of all FX trades. Secondly, the Chinese, like Britain, have an enormous issue to do with pensions. Pensions should be distributed around the world, and China is waking up to that and doing that with a vengeance. And London is a natural home to assist them on that asset management, the flow of funds, and the projects and investments that they want to do globally. And finally, it may have fallen a little bit out of favor in America, but with respect, I think the Chinese have really got their teeth into green and a green economy. And green finance is a major part of that, in which London is very clearly a leader. So these are all excellent areas for us to cooperate here in the city, supporting the 5 sectors that Gerard mentioned.
I'm glad you picked up on green finance, because I did want to talk about sustainability. And Zhiguang, you already talked about solar and wind a little bit earlier. Carl also co-chaired this first industrial cooperation dialogue between the two countries since 2022, aiming to promote cooperation in industrial decarbonisation and the digital economy. So do you see opportunities there?
Of course. China is, as we all know, China is the biggest producer of a solar panel, and now a large percentage of Chinese energy output comes from clean energy. So for sure, both on the realistic front as well as on the policy front, China is very, very strong in supporting upscaling and sort of decarbonising its industry. And with its huge capacity of manufacturing of solar panel and its technological reservoir on other forms of clean energy, including wind farm, as well as sort of the nuclear and the next generation nuclear, China certainly has this intention and the capability of being a source of inspiration as well as production for this kind of industrial decarbonisation initiative. On the other hand, I completely agree with the other two panelists. Mike also mentioned the British skill in terms of digital economy. China certainly, in order to fit in with the Chinese vision of dual circulation, to diversify its sort of a trading partner, as well as providing the entire world with an alternative way of conducting business and economic circulation. Digital economy as well as digital finance plays a crucial role in this sort of scheme. In a way, China needs experiences and innovation in digital trade, and certainly Britain would be able to provide that expertise as well as the infrastructure to support it. So it's a marriage of it could be a happy marriage.
I can see, Gerard, you're nodding along there. Innovation, experience, expertise. We have been talking quite a lot about what China can offer the UK, but what about the other way around? What is China looking for from Britain?
Well, if one looks at dual circulation, has been mentioned a couple of times. There's two different aspects to it. When what China is looking out, there's a great opportunity now for the UK, shall we say, given national security and geopolitical issues that Michael touched on, for the UK to really position itself in London in terms of the green energy centre and work with China. There's also the great opportunity to partner with China in other regions of the world as China goes out more. The UK has strong ties across Asia, the Middle East and Africa. So there's a natural sync between the two countries. But in terms of the Chinese market itself, there's a great opportunity there as China starts to move up the value curve, not just in areas like advanced manufacturing, etc. China probably thinks it's got enough of that itself, but very much from the UK perspective in terms of services and financial services. We've now had two very important economic and financial dialogues over the last few years. The one earlier this year in the UK-China relationship was about enhanced connectivity. Michael's talked about the green energy, which has really taken off further since then. And if we go back to the previous economic and financial dialogue a few years ago, that was very much focusing on London in terms of the offshore centre for the Chinese currency. But the one earlier this year in terms of connectivity is a real positive in terms of the ability for the UK to sell its business, professional and financial services into the Chinese market. It does require the Chinese opening up their domestic market even more. So that's something that's very positive. With a Bank of China hat on in London, just one final point, it was very noticeable at the Green Energy Week this summer that took place in the UK, how China, led by the Bank of China, was very much on the front foot, and how, partly because of developments between the US and, shall we say, other countries, London and the UK was being seen as a centre for that green energy market. Whether that potential is realised remains to be seen. So pulling it together, the opportunity for the UK to sell financial and business services in particular into the Chinese market as it continues to move up the value curve. And the other aspect is very much working with the Chinese outside of China as China tries to export more and in areas where we have a natural synergy, such as the green economy.
Michael, what might visits like this by Peter Kyle to China mean for the UK's relationship with other important trading partners like the United States, particularly considering the backdrop of trade tensions with China?
Well, there's several issues here, and many of them are quite speculative. I mean, firstly, as Gerard made the point, post-Brexit, and that's 9 years ago, Britain has to figure out its place in the world and assert what it's trying to do. Secondly, when we talk about other partners, whilst there's a tremendous focus on the United States, one should remember that actually Europe is far greater in terms of trade with the UK than America. When it comes to looking at America, it's also important to realize America can't do without China. We've just seen the end of July trade figures from the United States, and those figures show only a very slight diminution in trade between China and America, despite all of the rhetoric up there. In my view, we in Britain have to open up towards trading with everybody where possible, where they are at least meeting what I would consider minimal international standards of decency and human rights. That means opening up to quite a few people, and therefore I really welcome the government having taken a much more grown-up attitude towards trade. Partnership, though, is another level above that. And there things become more difficult. You can really only partner with people who share your values. But the only way in which you can start to share values is through trade. A very good example of this, going back to the green topic, is, of course, China's adoption 4 years ago of an emissions trading scheme. It looked around the world, it decided that's what it wanted to do, and it implemented it. So sharing our values there. Gerard mentioned professional services. One of the amazing things in China is the dominance of the UK actuarial model as versus the US actuarial model. So China is again starting to share our values in the way that we should be calculating more responsibly long-term debts, long-term obligations. And I'd like to see all of that continue to grow across financial and professional services.
Zhiguang, I can see you nodding along there, perhaps agreeing with Michael. So what about you? How do you see the UK balancing its relationship with China against its US ties?
I mean, it is definitely a very positive sign for me. As a person who has quite a strong connection with Britain and China, I would really hope to see that Britain and China would see a sort of a happy relation going on. But unfortunately, over the past decade or so, the rhetoric in the UK, as well as the entirety of Europe, is all about delinking, de-risking. So there is quite a bit of hostility, if lack of a better word, going on that jeopardize the bilateral and multilateral relations. This change, the visit of Peter Kyle, is showing not only the British side, but also the entire European side, a possibility of rekindle a healthy, equal, bilateral, multilateral relations that looks into the future. And that future, I would, again, mentioning the notion of dual circulation, I think one side that we definitely need, one aspect of dual circulation we need to emphasize on, that we haven't emphasized enough, is that this model of dual circulation that China is promoting is no longer the same style of circulation, international circulation, that China has been relying on for the past decades, which is China being the manufacturer of the entire world, and China just export. Now the dual circulation focuses much more on a healthy circulation, which includes not only production, export, but also import. China is intending to buy from the rest of the world. Only with that, the world could move away from its dependency model, which there is only one destination for all the goods and services to go to, all the surplus value to go to. But now, with the transformation of Chinese economy and more opening up, China could also become a center or a place, a sphere where money export for the rest of the world could go to. China could purchase not only produce, but also services. And this is certainly a healthy direction, not just for Britain against its US ties, but the entirety of the world, as long as we have more choices.
OK, so we're talking here about a lot of opportunity, but also a lot of challenges. Gerard, I wonder if you see an increased or an enhanced role for the United Kingdom as perhaps a go-between when we look at the backdrop of trade tensions between the US and China in particular?
Well, the answer to that clearly is a yes. To put it in context, one needs to be cognizant of national security issues at the same time as we talk about these trade opportunities. So in many respects, one could think of it from a UK perspective, in answer to your question, of a sort of clear red line. On one side of the red line are national security, intelligence issues, where the UK naturally aligns with the United States of America. But on the other side of that line is a huge opportunity for the UK both to deepen its bilateral relationship with China and work closely with China as a go-to place. And that covers trade, business, finance, and all these professional services that we've talked about. The green energy is probably the most obvious near-term opportunity in showing whether that can work. And obviously these bilateral meetings between the Chinese coming to the UK and doing more in the UK and the UK going the other way is an opportunity. Maybe one area where we could hope to see further opportunity too is for Chinese inward investment into the UK. It is still relatively small. It's only about 0.2% of the overall stock in the UK. It's only less than £2 billion sterling. But what we've seen, certainly from a Bank of China perspective, is Chinese banks and financial companies really deepen their relationship with the UK based in London. So if London continues to be the #2 global financial centre, certainly I would expect to see that relationship between China and the UK deepen in terms of financial services at the very least.
OK, so let's talk about foreign direct investment the other way round. You know, Michael, market access issues have been addressed in a series of stimulus measures to counter economic headwinds like weak domestic demand, trade tensions, and that sluggish property market. How far would you say that all goes to opening up more commercial activities for foreign investors like the UK?
Well, the UK has been a particularly difficult market for overseas investors in some respects, when you think about it, particularly when it comes to things like large infrastructure projects. Gerard mentioned the C word, consistency, and consistency has been lacking for well over a decade. Take some of the major projects, HS2 comes to mind, many fantasy projects. So it's been very difficult for overseas investors to figure out where to go. When it comes to property, that's fairly straightforward. But when it comes to property in terms of infrastructure, it becomes very difficult. The government over the last 14 months has made a lot of hay about its focus on, firstly, what are the industrial areas where it wants to grow? Secondly, what it's doing on infrastructure. And beneath all of that, the importance of getting a planning regime that will work. We're in the early stages of seeing whether or not that is a consistent planning regime. The Chinese embassy, for example, comes to mind. But we're seeing at least a government that understands the importance of this. And this is making Britain more attractive to overseas investors. However, it's important to realize, why do you want overseas investment? Frankly, most countries have to build their own roads, schools, and hospitals. It's not that we're going to have billions of people coming here and building it for us and then disappearing. It's actually going to be built by Britons. What we really want is expertise, new knowledge, new techniques. That's why you attract co-investment. That's actually the importance of FDI. And I'm looking forward to, as we are actually already in green energy, learning from the Chinese as much as we are exporting knowledge to them.
And what about luring more foreign investors into China, Zhiguang?
Yeah, well, of course. As you can see, Peter Carl is visiting China as Xiamen's trade fair, which is quite a unique trade fair that is specifically focusing on foreign direct investment. So that foreign direct investment goes both ways. Now, China is definitely using this opportunity to showcase to the rest of the world that opening up of China is sincere and consistent. But China is expecting different types of sort of foreign direct investment, not the formerly labor-intensive type of industry, but industry that allows services and high-tech industry that allows further development of the entirety of the economy. And then also that Xiamen Trade Fair serves a second purpose, Chinese cooperation going global. So foreign direct, the outward foreign direct investment to sort of the rest of the world. And I think it is quite symbolic, and we could, both sides could use this opportunity to speak to the rest of the world that a new type of cooperation is going on.
Gerard, the UK was guest of honour at that trade fair. I mean, how important are events like that for foreign businesses looking to get a foothold in China?
Well, I think they're very important. The UK had over 100 companies. I think it was its biggest representation ever at that trade fair. So, and I think it was the 25th year of that trade fair. So the UK has been going a long time, but it was a key opportunity for the UK to showcase its opportunities. At the same time, the fact that the Chinese chose the UK as the main country was a signalling from the Chinese perspective that they wanted to deepen ties. Probably there was a political aspect to that as well, but certainly from the economic and financial side, it was a positive signal. Look, the UK needs to really play to its strengths and also position itself versus the competition, our competition, which is the continent, the European Union, etc., and other countries elsewhere in the world. So coming back to your question, those events are important, but we've had a number of them this year, and coming back to the C that we've talked about at the beginning, consistency, we need to build on that and continue with that. And I think there's a positive vibe now in terms of the UK-China relationship. Naturally, the UK is trying to position itself with other countries around the world. But when one looks at it from a trade perspective, the UK is looking to try and very much sell into the Indo-Pacific, the growth markets of the future, of which China is an important part. Maybe the UK can actually align with China in the rest of the Pacific region as well. That remains to be seen. So coming back to your question, these trade fairs are vitally important. They send a very positive message and signal, but you really need to follow up on it and execute.
Gerard, Lyons, Zhiguang, Michael Manelli, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Remember, you can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also find more agenda content on CGTN Europe's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and YouTube channels. Until next time, goodbye.
The most interesting questions.
Are there other living beings beyond Earth?
Will man or machine be in charge?
Great question.
Always have more than one answer.
Well, hold on, let me just draw up a list.
And always come from more than one person.
That's where the credibility lies.
The concept of having a machinery which is alive and evolving didn't wait for us.
The end of inequality of incomes and wealth around the world, can you imagine how difficult that is at the moment to achieve?
Every episode, Stephen Cole, Murray Beveridge, and some of the brightest minds out there shed light on the answers to some of the most intriguing questions.
There are two ways of looking at this.
Machines can't really discriminate between civilian and military targets.
The Answers Project.
Maybe we need to just look at this in a bit more detail.
Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence.
The Answers Project, a new podcast from CGTN Europe.